Good morning, good evening, good everything in between. Welcome to a week 7 of the podcast. I'm your humble host, Mr. Jimbo Bernicki, and I am joined by my co-host with the most, Mr. Gabe Lerman. How are you today, Gabe?
I'm contemplating how much better Yoshinobu Yamamoto needs to be in order for people on this side of the Pacific to want him on their club.
I think he needs to be a foot taller and throw 10 miles an hour faster. That's probably what
So
what
you
they
want
need.
him to be Otani, basically.
Yeah, exactly. That's all you got to do. Listen, just be Otani, and people will be interested. It's simple as that. And on the other side, I have our color commentator, who we all appreciate everywhere we go today, and we have Mr. Michael Beasley. How you doing, Michael?
Trying to survive the interleague, the part of interleague we don't like when all the PL teams are on the road.
It
Right. This whole week
sucks.
is in Central League ballparks.
Yeah, I know it's the worst. Like I wake up every morning, I'm like, oh, I'm gonna watch. No, I'm not gonna watch. I get very sad.
Not every team even posts highlights. It's tough out here if Brent and my heart goes out to any Central League fans. Like, I'm sorry, you're dealing with the worst of it if you're on this side of the Pacific.
Oh yeah, no, but I figure they must have some sort of arrangement to have very legal, very good streams going on. But we use the best service, the best stream. It's just, we don't get it for like 2 weeks of the year, and it's very sad.
One of my friends is a Central League team fan, and he lives on box scores and the team's website.
Oof, that's rough. We'll tell him he should be a Pacific League fan so he could, get all the good benefits Pacific League TV. That's what we're here for.
Stop living in the 80s, man.
Nah, dude, ain't radical enough.
So here we are and our seventh week of doing the podcast, and we are in the third week of interleague play. We are almost at the end, and it's almost as tight as can be. A bunch of teams are still in it right down to the wire. I do want to do a little checkup on our all-star votes because we did do that, I think, about a month ago. Roki Sasaki is still leading the way over Yoshinobu Yamamoto for the starting pitcher, but the Oryx ace is catching up. Yuki Yanagita has overtaken Tomoyo Mori with most overall votes for a Pacific League player, though just barely. And I did notice something funny. Again, as usual, when I say something is something, it isn't. I feel like when I said with our first All Star show that Yuki doesn't really play DH that much, he's almost always playing DH now. So, again, what do I know? And let's see, what else do we have here? Among movers and shakers, Yuma Tongu of the Buffaloes has overtaken Kiyomiya at the first place votes at first base. And I hope, sort of on that same line, that Chusei Minami can sort of start making up ground for the fighters because he has been really good so far, and we will get a little more into that. But actually, well, sorry, speaking of that, we have our May MVPs too. Every month the Pacific League announces their official MVPs, and we have a pair of fighters, Chusei Minami and Takayuka Kato. I get it at this. I did it that time. And because those are both fighters, I will let Gabe extrapolate a little more on that as we get through the show. But guys, what do you want to talk about this week?
So what I got for you this week is really relevant to interleague. Hanshin pitcher Yuki Nishi is seeking a win from Oryx today in today's start. If he gets that win against Oryx, he will become the 20th pitcher in NPB history since the 12 teams were established in 1958 to get a win against all 12 teams.
Nice.
The first was Osamu Nomura, who played for the Taiyo Whales way back when, and then later played for the Lotte Orions, Nippon Ham Fighters, and back again to the Hanshin Tigers. Back then, it was a lot more difficult. You actually had to jump back and forth between both leagues or, do it in the Japan series, which would have been really difficult. You'd have to rely on all those teams to make it that far every year. Two foreign players have done it. Seth Greisinger was the first. He played with the Swallows, Giants, and Marines, did it in 2012. The most recent foreigner was Jason Stanridge, who did it June 9th, 2014. And the most recent player to do it was Takayuki Kishi last year on June 9th. And three players have done it again, have gotten wins against 13 teams, having careers while Kintetsu was still around, and then going on to beat the Oryx Buffaloes later once the Rakuten Eagles, I should say.
Nice. That's pretty good.
Mm-hmm. And Yuki Nishi is a former Buffalo himself, if memory serves.
I believe so.
We're going to do a mini Gabe's History Corner for my headline. And I say this watching a little bit of the Oakland Athletics reverse boycott as the Oakland fans are pushing hard against their ownership, begging the team not to leave Oakland, where they've been for the last 55 years, and move to Las Vegas. And that got me thinking, in honor of that reverse boycott, and in solidarity with athletics fans, to reveal where some of the Pacific League teams have been before their current domiciles right now. And there have been two very distinct periods of moving and shaking, most of that taking place in the late 70s to early 80s, and then another brief spurt around the turn of the millennium. Going by franchise, the Chiba Lotte Marines used to be located in Tokyo proper for a while. They actually played at Tokyo Stadium on the outskirts of town. In the mid 70s, what was then known as the Lotte Orions packed up and moved to Sendai, but they only played half their season there. Then when the Taiyo Whales left Kawasaki to move into Yokohama and the brand new Yokohama Stadium, the Orions realized there was a vacancy there and moved full-time to Kawasaki. They stayed there until 1992 before moving across the bay to Chiba, where they play today as the Marines.
A quick question, sort of in that vein. You guys have been to Japan, and I was just kind of curious. As I get more familiar with Japanese geography. Do people consider Chiba and Tokyo like totally different places, or is Chiba sort of like outer Tokyo?
It's part of the greater Tokyo conurbation because, for example, Tokyo Narita Airport is in Chiba Prefecture.
Okay, right. Okay.
Think of it as Disneyland is in LA technically, but it's actually in Anaheim. Or like the Tampa Bay Rays don't play in Tampa Bay.
Okay.
They don't play in Tampa. They play on Tampa Bay in St. Pete's.
In St. Pete. Chiba is its own prefecture, and while it is right next to Tokyo, I would say that the two people couldn't be any more different if they tried.
Is Chiba to Hamilton as Toronto is to Tokyo?
Oh, I don't know,
That was for Gabe.
Yeah, I think Yokohama's the more akin to Hamilton.
Okay.
Given that it's also west of Tokyo proper, or southwest. I think a better example might be Oshawa or Kingston.
Ugh, those are places I don't like to think about ever.
Okay. Apologies for the Canadian content. Back to the history corner.
Video
no, hold on. You said we might be able to get you said we could get a Canadian broadcasting grant or something like that.
That's true. We do need to look into that, actually.
Still working on that, yeah. Next up for the Buffaloes, it's a long story, but before the merger that created the modern Oryx Buffaloes, the Oryx franchise, then known as the Blue Wave and employers of a guy named Ichiro, played in Kobe, to the west of Osaka and on the west end of what they call the Kansai region. Before that, under the ownership of Hankyu and called the Braves, they played in Nishinomiya, the same city where the Hanshin Tigers' home base is located. The Buffaloes name comes from the Kintetsu Buffaloes, and they've always played in Osaka. In fact, the Kyocera Dome, the Osaka Dome, was built for them. The Fukuoka SoftBank Hawks started in Osaka as the Nankai Hawks, and their old ballpark is now a shopping center called Namba Parks and actually has a Hawks museum on the rooftop. I'm looking to go there myself in October. The Fighters, I think we mentioned earlier, they used to play in Tokyo, sharing Korakuen and then Tokyo Dome with the Giants before decamping to Sapporo in 2004 and really making Hokkaido their home base and winning 2 Japan series there, employing some notable names like Darvish and Otani. So that's how they've helped to make their home base there. The cool part about the Fighters is that they will occasionally have home games at Tokyo Dome just because they have so many fans still in that neck of the woods. Like, I can't imagine there's too many Washington Senators fans who get all uppity and cheer when the Twins come back into town, or any Washington Senators fans who get all uppity and cheer when the Texas Rangers come back to town. I'm making a joke there because there's 2 separate Washington franchises in the American League that moved to Minnesota and Texas.
Yeah, sorry, that confused me for a second. I was thinking about that. The first one, I was like, yeah, that's true. And the second one, I was like, wait, that's also true. That is weird, huh?
And now, of course, they have the Nationals, which are the ex-Expos. Sorry, Jimbo. That bruise might still be fresh.
It is.
Question for you, Gabe. You ever play out of the park baseball in like a historical save, and then you just kind of sim for a couple of years or whatever, and then all of a sudden you're like, where'd the Senators go?
Yeah, I've played that game. It's unfortunate that NPB is no longer available in it, but that's one of the things that got me really deep into NPB and learning the names and stuff was playing that game. So now I guess you got to deal with Pawapuro and imported or pro spirits, or listen to us. Hey,
there you go. Good, nice little self plug on our own show.
the last team that relocated was the Saitama Seibu Lions, who started life as the Nishitetsu Lions, playing in Fukuoka until the late 1970s when they were acquired and moved to Tokorozawa in Saitama Prefecture, an hour or so outside of Tokyo proper. I don't think there's too many Lions fans still in Fukuoka because of how distant that move was. But sure enough, when the Hawks visit the Buffaloes at Osaka Dome, there's a lot of Hawks fans who bust out the Nankai green, and sometimes even the team will too, in what they call the Kansai Classic. And the Buffaloes will reach back into their steamer chest and bust out the Braves or the Blue Wave or the Buffaloes jerseys just for the occasion.
Hearing all this actually helps kind of give a lot of perspective too. I've noticed throughout the year there's a lot of special games that take place in Tokyo, and now it makes a lot more sense. I'm now like, okay, I get why some teams kind of go back to Tokyo, sort of to appeal to their old fan base. And that's really cool. Like we've said in our previous podcast, I think that's a beautiful thing that the league does.
It also helps that Japan is small enough that you can have these travel games and the fans will travel along with you. So even if your team was the Hawks, they used to play in Osaka, well, Fukuoka's only, 2-3 hours away by bullet train? If you really wanted to go see a game, you could. Meanwhile, if I take a train for 3 hours, not only am I still in Ontario, but there's no baseball nearby.
I don't even know if you get to Montreal with that.
No, you're halfway there.
Oh, geez. I'm taking a train to Toronto next week, so that'll be exciting for me.
Wait, you guys have infrastructure for public transportation?
Oh, don't knock it, Michael. You at least have high-speed rail.
No, we don't.
The Excella goes faster than our rinky-dink little Via trains.
Oh, they gotta really fight for train track time. It gets ridiculous.
Yeah, here too, but that's our infrastructure woes and not relevant to Japan because Japan travel or train travel makes everything else look like Brio trains.
Well, that is sort of relevant in that sense. We're praising Japan for having this marvelous infrastructure that we could only dream of having here.
And to be fair, one of those train companies owns the Lions.
There you go. Full circle.
They need infrastructure to ensure that their fans can get to away games. It's
what an idea. Imagine caring about your fans. What a concept. And now, on that note, a quick word from our sponsors.
So, you want to watch Pacific League games, but can't get up early during the week?
I work from home.
Or stay up late enough on the weekends?
I have a life, you weirdos.
Not to worry, we've got you covered. FTF Sports broadcasts a game of the day with English commentary, Tuesdays through Sundays at 1 p.m. Eastern. Check your set-top box channel list or visit ftfsports.com for streaming options. With FTF, the Pacific League is finally on your schedule.
And so that brings us to our Around the Horn segment, where we go through all the teams in the league from top to bottom and talk about what's going on with them on an individual basis, get a closer look at how our teams are doing. And so this week we are starting off with the best team in the Pacific League, not just my opinion, but it is their record too, the Chiba Lotte Marines. Take it away, Michael.
First things first, they are back in first.
Woo!
As of right now. Producer man, play some sound effects, cheering and all that. Well, they're tied with Oryx, technically. Well,
Good
not
enough.
technically they are. Their last game, they lost on a 7-0 shutout against Chunichi. Hiroto Takahashi threw a 9K complete game shutout. So they're silenced right there, but they have worked their way back, and I think that they will at least end the season in A class. I think that's my final prediction on that. Maybe they'll win the pennant for the Pacific League. Maybe they'll be in second. Your Sasaki update, because of course we have to have a Sasaki update. He gives us the most views, you see. His last start was June 11th. They won 6-5 against Hiroshima. Sasaki actually had a no-no going to the fifth, but I swear he has a no-hitter going into every single game at this point. There's a couple of pitches that in the fifth inning that really should have ended the fifth inning, but once again, there was just I wasn't aware of that umpire strike zone. I didn't know it was different than what the strike zone is. There was a big walk that very clearly frustrated Sasaki, and I mean, he's only like 21, so I don't really know if he knows how to properly move on after an ump squeezes him like that or something like that. Like, it seems like he just gets very frustrated when an ump's just not, as perfect as he is.
Yeah, that does seem to be a bit of a developing theme as we're going through the season.
Right now, it's only happened twice, but it's like when it happens, you notice it for at least a few innings. But of course, 7 innings, 5 hits, 2 runs, 1 walk, 10 Ks, and a W.
And
At the end.
that last one's all that counts.
Yeah, I was just say at the end of the day, as long as you get your W, right?
Yep.
Speaking of teams that are familiar with picking up Ws, moving on to the second place team, Osaka's Oryx Buffaloes. Take it away, Gabe.
Yeah, well, somewhat. They're 2-4 in their last 6, including getting shut out in back-to-back games by the Giants and dropping the baseball for breakfast effort on June 9th, which both of you two sat in on. Bit of inglorious history. The 6 runs they gave up in the 10th inning on June the 8th tied the franchise worst mark in the modern NPB. The last time they gave up 6 in an extra frame was 33 years ago. Part of that was a Yoshihiro Maru grand slam. So that was not exactly a nice moment. But then you're never going to have a long losing streak when you have Yoshinobu Yamamoto pitching every 6th day. He pitched another 8 shutout innings with 11 strikeouts and only 3 base runners today at Koshien against the Hanshin Tigers, which pulls him into the ERA lead, ties Roki Sasaki in wins, and is only 11 behind Roki Sasaki for the strikeout lead. No pitcher in NPB history has gotten 3 straight pitching triple crowns. YY wants that one. Some slightly less positive news. Buffalo's manager Satoshi Nakajima is out of commission for the foreseeable future due to a health concern. Their bench coach Katsumi Mizumoto will be filling in. When Nakajima got COVID last year, Mizumoto filled in. The team went 3-3 in the 6 games under Mizumoto. Positive vibes and get well soon, Nakajima Kantoku. Newly registered to the top club today, Yuki Udagawa, last year's fireman reliever and WBC champion, as well as second baseman Koji Oshiro, known as a defensive stud. Udagawa actually credited WBC teammate Yu Darvish and his manager Nakajima for caring about his mental health, saying he's ready to win back his spot in the bullpen. Last note for the Buffaloes, and you mentioned his name earlier, Banzai to Yuma Tongu, the converted catcher now taken over at first base. He's having a breakout season as that third bat behind Tomoya Mori and Yutaro Sugimoto. He leads the Pacific League in average at 349, in on base at 420, nice, and OPS at 908. His WRC plus sits at 183 at the start of the week, so 80% better than the average NPB batter. I honestly wasn't calling for Tongu to have this big of a breakout. My money was more on Keita Nakagawa or Ryo Ota, so it's been a pleasant surprise. Combine that with Tokumasa Chano's speed, and that's why the Buffaloes have one of the more deadly lineups in the Pacific League.
Yeah, Tongu's really impressed me so far this season. I was really impressed with him at the game we called earlier in the week. Also, just like a funny aside, when you mentioned the crushing Giants loss where they gave up those 6 runs in the 10th inning, when I woke up that morning, I turned on like my Pacific League TV and I saw the games. And so I see that game and I'm like, wait a minute, they're in the 10th inning and the Giants are up by 6? How does that work? What happened? like I was just trying to rack my brain. I'm like, that must be some sort of like glitch in the translation.
Bad stuff happened. The joke used to be Oryx gonna Oryx. Up until 2021, they were the lovable loser. They always had some misfortune befall them. So the 6-run inning and the throwing errors, plural, that contributed to the loss on June 9th. Oryx gonna Oryx. But now they have the ability to bounce back and actually stop Oryxing and get back to being the Japan Series champions that they have been for the last year.
And I believe that brings us around to the Fukuoka SoftBank Hawks, who, just like the Buffaloes, also went 2-4 this week. You might find, if you're paying attention, there's a bit of a theme this week with our teams going 2-4, including a crushing series loss to the Giants. Still, though, it's 2 more games coming up against the Swallows, and they are still hanging in there in the interleague race. And then they finish off the interleague season against the Tigers, so they're only 1 game back from the Bay Stars. Maybe the Hawks still pull off the interleague win like we all predicted at the beginning of the interleague session. In news regarding the team specifically, Alfredo Despaigne, the Cuban slugger and world-traveling baseball aficionado, is now back with the team. And so, it never hurts to have another slugging bat in the lineup. But big ups to Kensuke Kondo, who's picked up an RBI in every game this week except for one, getting 9 on the week. Definitely earning his place among the top vote getters in the PL All-Star race. And also, really cool news, expecting to move up to the big club soon is Carter Stewart Jr., a former top American prospect who was drafted in the first round by the Atlanta Braves in 2018. He struggled to sort of make an impact at the higher levels of professional leagues, but he's been doing really well in the Japanese minors and looks to make an impact with the Hawks, so let's definitely keep an eye on that for him.
Carter Stewart Jr. has appeared in a few top-level games, but always seemed to struggle with his control. He's been able to keep his control much better in this season in the minors, so good things will come. And who knows, maybe other prospects will start to take his path to head to Japan, not get paid sub-minimum wage, develop, and then once you're a free agent, head back to America fully developed and ready to cash in.
Yeah, that is one of the interesting things that I noticed when looking into him earlier is that he was a top first round pick in America, and then after I think a season or two in the minors, was like, I'm going to go to Japan and take a shot over there. Again, it hasn't quite worked out for him yet. He hasn't broken through yet, but let's see what he does this season. And on a quick little bit of a dour note, on Sunday, Koya Fuji injured with a left internal oblique tear, and he's going to be out for about 5 weeks. So that sucks, but hopefully the team can still go on without him.
I mean, hey, they did just register Kohei Arihara, the former Texas Ranger and former Hokkaido Nippon Ham fighter. So there's your stopgap in the rotation right there.
Exactly.
Two things on Carter Stewart. He actually didn't even end up signing. He was selected by the Braves, but there was an issue with it was something to do with his physical. There was an issue, I think, going back to an injury he had as a child. I forget what the injury cause was. And the Braves, after they found out, they weren't going to offer him whatever his slot was worth. So after that, that's when the Hawks came in and offered, I believe, well above his slot. And then I do believe in his first year with the Hawks, he actually did get called up at least to pitch like at least 1 or 2 games. They usually do that with a lot of the big name prospects. They'll just call you up even if you're not ready, just to see what happens.
That's such a Hawks move, just to like.
All teams really do it. There's been a lot of players. The Fighters did it with Kosei Yoshida, the Koshin tournament pretty much icon. Great story there, but his first year they called him up and he was like 18 and they tried to use him as a starter and didn't work out real that game. Didn't really work out.
Well, you never know unless you try.
Yeah, and then on Despaigne, this being his 10th season now, he no longer counts as a foreign player. So if he's able to, produce at a high level again and maintain that production, perhaps even to another year, that is a lineup that is very important to the lineup because now you can get more big foreign bats while having one in the lineup that counts domestically. And I think the last time that happened, successfully was the Oryx Buffaloes in 2008 or 2009, maybe 2010, with Alex Cabrera and Tuffy Rhodes, both of which did no longer count as foreign players. So there was 2 huge bats in the Oryx lineup back then.
Right. Yeah. No, that makes sense. And actually, no, I was just thinking for a second, might it be a little too too late in terms of him being 36 years old? But as we've seen this season with Takeya Nakamura, you can always keep slugging when you're in your 40s. You never know what might happen if you just roll the guy out there and let him go.
Yeah, I think the last player to be no longer listed as a foreign player was Vladimir Ballantyne, and he was signed by the Hawks from the Swallows, and that was a classic case of being, mid to late 30s. They gave him a 2-year deal, a pretty massive 2-year deal, and age just kind of caught up with him. And I remember seeing Hawks fans on the internet, even the Japanese Hawks fans, just getting really upset, that they gave him all this money and it just wasn't working out.
Well, Valentine was at least able to stay in well enough shape to represent the Netherlands in this year's WBC. So he did go out as a national team member.
There was a lot of NPB alumni in the WBC. Scott Matheson was still pitching for Team Canada, and I think Brandon Dixon was still on Team USA, or at least he was in the Olympics most recently. Former Oryx pitcher.
Yeah, the Canadian team. Let's not talk about that too much.
Hey, we were better than Great Britain. Yay.
Is that like a child yelling at his parents?
I learned it from you, okay?
Oh man, let's just quick aside. The moment we brought up the WBC and we were I was thinking of different teams, like when you mentioned the Netherlands. Those Great Britain uniforms, what was that? Those were the worst baseball uniforms I think I've ever seen in my life. Like even worse than those White Sox ones we clowned on a while ago. Those things literally just looked like someone went to a store and was like, "I need a shirt that says Britain on it. What can you do?"
I think it
Yeah.
was a classic case of, oh yeah, we have a team. What do you mean we qualified? We need jerseys.
Yeah, it was not a good look for anybody.
But hey, they qualified. If I'm not mistaken, they actually won a game. Good on the Great British team. And I know that there's a lot of fans in Britain who are puffing their chests about that. Baseball Brit on Twitter, looking at you.
I would love to see whenever I watch cricket, I always think like I would just want to see one game between a bunch of like English and Australian cricketers against American baseball players. Like
Have
you
you
No,
ever
no, no, no. If you know, baseball and cricket are completely different games.
I
You
know.
want to see something fun, get the best ML, get a team of major leaguers and a bunch of Finnish Pesapallo players, because that is a
Ooh.
mutant form of baseball that at least is still recognizable as baseball.
Okay, you know what? That's fair play actually. That's a much better comp. That would be interesting.
have you ever seen that British meme of Barry 63? And it's like if you look it up, it's like an old British guy holding a pint and he's just real happy and bald. I want to see that guy playing first base in the major someday. With the way the big games go
Oh, that
international, I
guy,
want to see
yeah.
that. I want to
Yeah.
see something like that.
The pub man. Yeah, that would be great. Oh, reminds me, now we're getting way off track, but
Yeah,
there's
and
a
let's get back on track, shall we?
okay, okay, fine. So I believe that brings us over to the Nippon Ham Fighters, who are in fourth place. Take it away, Gabe.
Yeah, 2-4 in their last week, but hey, series win at home over the Tigers, that bodes well, and that speaks to the quality of this team. Getting swept by the Carp, less good. So that balances out. It's a season. First off, we mentioned the MVPs for the month are both fighters. Starting off, pitcher Takayuki Kato. I mentioned him before. In May, in his 4 starts, he went 3-0 with a complete game shutout, 30 innings pitched, 17 strikeouts, 3 runs, only one of them earned for a .3 ERA. And you'll notice I didn't mention walks. That's because Kato has only issued 6 walks all season. 6.
Wow. Okay.
Next closest pitcher is Eagles starter Takahisa Hayakawa with 12. In the Pacific League, Kato ranks 3rd in FIP with 2.98, 2nd in ERA with 2.14, 4th in opponent average at 2.27. So he remains the ace of aces on that fighter's staff. And you still got Ito and Uesawa rounding into form too. So good news. For Chusei Manami, the batter MVP, how does 7 home runs, 15 RBIs, a 600 slugging percentage over 25 games sound? Buddy is lighting it up. It'll be fun to see him move towards his natural outfield position because Kotaro Kiyomiya is back from the farm, registered today. His absence due to injury may also be why Yuma Tongu is taking the lead at first base in the All-Star voting. Now that Manami can have a couple of days in the outfield, Kota Yazawa can focus more on his pitching side. Also getting registered, Kazunari Ishii. He returns to the infield to help them out and show up on some top 20 plays reels. It's not all Daigo Kamikawabata, you know. And finally, the slightly sad note, Gosuke Kato's consecutive hitting streak from his debut ended at 10 games. It's a new franchise record and ties the Pacific League record. He was held hitless on June 8th. It's a shame. I still want his jersey.
And that brings us over to the 5th place team in the Pacific League, the climbing, rising, working their way up. I believe 2nd place in interleague play, which I would have never predicted going into it. The Rakuten Golden Eagles. Take it away, Michael.
Rakuten Eagles finally out of the basement. We can all celebrate.
Well, not everyone. There's one team not celebrating.
Oh, that's fine. 6-4 in their last 10. They won their last game yesterday, 3-6. The stat sheet for that game honestly looked like a very, very modern MLB game where the starter went like 5 innings. And then after that, Rakuten just used 5 more relievers. Very pre 3-batter minimum MLB I'm talking about, because there was an inning where there was 3 pitchers used. You don't really see that too much where it's that many pitchers in one game. The game was closed up by Yuki Matsui. 1 hit, 2 Ks. Things are looking up. Their team leader in batting average is Hiroto Kofukata. He's batting .245, which is up from the last time we touched on that, where the team leader was batting .226 or something like that. Asamura and Kofukata are basically the entire Rakuten offense at this point. They pretty much lead the team in all offensive categories. And something to look out for tonight if you're able to watch it, watch a box score or anything. Tanaka starts tonight, so keep an eye on that.
And that brings us over to the unfortunate basement dwellers, the bottom of the Pacific League, the Saitama Seibu Lions. Just like almost everyone else except the Eagles, it seems they had a rough 2-4 week and now again find themselves in the basement. But I'm going to try to be positive because there is stuff to be positive about. Sosuke Genda is back and is returning to form, still playing well defensively. Playing a couple games at DH, but I think they're just trying to find his form back with the back into hitting. And hey, he picked up 4 hits and 2 RBIs this week. That might not sound that impressive, but that was about half of the Lions offense this week. So, all right, that's something to build on. At least he's performing well. Kai Matara continues to be exciting, if nothing else. He picked up 12 strikeouts in a very close loss to the Swallows. Other than that, the Lions can just hope that interleague season ends and they can go back to trying to win games against Pacific League teams. It's been really hard for them this season. I'm not sure what has been has such a dark cloud over the team, but seems team morale is really low. But hopefully they can get out of the slump and try to work their way back into the playoff picture. But they just keep sliding farther and farther away. And that brings us to another ad from one of our sponsors. Take a listen.
Hey, my name's Shane, and I swear, I'm a real consumer, just like you. So I just replaced all my expensive shorts with...
What are you doing in here? I thought I threw you out already.
I gotta go, bye.
How do they keep getting in here? That's the third advertiser I've thrown out today. When you subscribe to Pacific League TV, there's no ads. Nothing in between innings, nothing for a pitching change. You get to see all the action on the field. And of course, you also get full archives going back to 2011. All the baseball you could ever want to watch, and nobody trying to convince you to buy some clothing brand you've never heard of. 1450 yen per month. That's like $10 in today's exchange rate. And you get all that and no ads. Okay, but for real, who's letting these guys in here? Jim? Gabe? Is it any of you? Well, it's not me.
Now it's time to once again get introspective, focus on this side of the Pacific, and to take a look at our familiar faces and how they're doing stateside. First off, kudos to Boston Strong on Twitter for this tidbit, and I know it's tough to include him as a rookie, but among American League rookies as of June 11th, Masataka Yoshida is first in batting average, on-base percentage, hits, doubles, walks, and fewest strikeouts. Second in runs scored, RBIs, and slugging percentage. We warned you.
And for once, I'm going to jump in on this segment because I watched my first MLB game of the season the other night, and I got to see Shohei Ohtani just do some Shohei Ohtani things. Hit 2 home runs in a extra inning game. One of those home runs coming in the extra inning to put this team ahead at the 12th. That brings him up to 5 home runs this week, just this week alone, and picking up 9 RBIs. Now he leads the league with 20 home runs. Goat's gonna goat. I thought it was kind of funny when you were talking about how well Chusei Minami's playing, and don't get me wrong, he's been great. But the month he's had was basically the week Ohtani had. Like, oh my God, he is special to say the least. What a fantastic player.
A unicorn, if there ever was one.
To say the least. And that brings us to our question of the day.
So Wajahat Ali reached out to me directly on Twitter about this, and his hopes that NPB will not implement some of the game changes that the majors have introduced. The Manfred Man, the larger bases, limiting pickoffs, and most importantly for him, the pitch clock. The pitch clock is being tested in the occasional minor league game in NPB. So I'm curious what your two's thoughts are on some of the modern game changes and if you have any appetite for them.
You know what? Now that I've officially watched my first MLB game, that I got to see all of these things. I got the pitch clock and I got the Manfred rule in the extra innings. I don't hate the pitch clock. I don't think it matters that much. I think it's more of a hypothetical thing, but most pitchers seem to respect it without worrying too much about it. Even in MPB, I feel like most pitches happen within 20 seconds, so it shouldn't be a problem, I think. The extra base runner, now that I've seen it happen, not a huge fan of it. I all things considered, if we're going to go with the rules of MPB where you can have draws, just have draws. We don't need the extra man on base. It sort of overcomplicates things in that sense for me. But the pitch clock, I'm not against it. I'd be interested to see how it works.
So when it comes to the pitch clock and the modern things have been implemented in MLB. Personally, I don't really feel that NPB by itself needs a pitch clock. I don't really think there's a single pitcher out there that. Have you guys seen the famous video on Twitter where I forget I think it's Pedro Baez maybe. You can watch the entire Kentucky Derby and the time it takes him to throw one pitch.
Really? Wow, that's funny. I remember that like when I watched MLB a lot, there were some pitchers that just
There,
took their damn
there was
time, like
another
Jose
one.
Valverde. Like,
There was
damn,
one where they actually linked up an entire episode of Seinfeld and the time it took a guy to finish off the inning. So
that's insane.
I don't think NPB's got any pitcher like that per se. But the reason I'm very supportive of the pitch clock is, when you have some of your star players and they take a while to throw a pitch or they take a while at their at bat or whatever, those are your star players. They're playing a different game. But to put it bluntly, when you have some road to the show create a character out there taking 5 minutes between each pitch, like, stop that. You're wasting my time. Stop that. Especially on those West Coast games where, the game starts at 9:40 Eastern Standard Time and half of it is spent watching some dude just take his gloves off and he didn't even swing. Like, I'm a fan of the pitch clock. The 3 batter minimum, I can take it or leave it. That never bothered me. I never really, he's going back to that was never an issue to me. The Manfred man, so far, I think statistically the Phillies have benefited from the Manfred man, so therefore I am pro Manfred man. Until they have a losing record with the Manfred man, I am for it.
My only issue sort of with the Manfred man, I mean, I have a few issues, but one of the things I do find a bit kind of dubious about it is that if we're being statistical purists, right, like Shohei Ohtani had a home run in the 12th inning yesterday where he picked up 3 runs for that. And without the Manfred man, that would have only been 2 runs. And so I could definitely get why there might be like purists who really object to it from like a purely statistical level like that. It is a little wonky in that sense.
Someone can allow a run to score in the top or bottom of an extra inning without having allowed the runner. Does it count as an earned run?
Huh.
I think it doesn't count as an earned run. I think I remember this being one of the big arguments when it started happening. I don't believe it's an earned run.
Yeah, if I'm a pitcher, I'm definitely arguing against that for sure. Yeah, that's interesting. I never even considered
I mean,
that.
Jimbo, you and I have both followed hockey by dint of simply existing in Canada.
Mm-hmm.
So you remember when ties got phased out and shootouts became how we would end games after overtime in the regular season. I think American sports leagues are just allergic to ties. It's too European. It's too Premier League football. Every game's 0-0.
Yeah,
that sort of thing.
Yeah, I always remember that being a thing.
Given how few games even end up going to 12 innings, I'd be okay with ties. I have never seen one in person or on stream. Let me put it that way. A team has always come out on top. And I've been to 15 NPB games in person, a few of which went to extras, some of which went to the 12th inning.
For me, with ties specifically in American baseball, I think it's too ingrained in like sort of the fundamental culture and history of the sport. I think that's the one place you kind of can't override it. There's all sorts of little things you can change, but baseball in America, it's got to end when it's got to end, even if it's a million innings. It is the way it is. For that one specifically, I think you got to go for it. But all the other rule changes, I'm very open to. But
so
no,
the limiting pickoffs, I can kind of see what they were trying to do. I don't think it's necessary. The larger bases, I know Wajahat was disparaging in his tweet about it. Honestly, I'm in favor of them. In fact, I'd like to go one step further. I think the softball style double width first base needs to be brought in at the pro level, specifically to avoid collisions between runners and fielders at first.
Yeah,
so that way the base runner runs on the foul side of the foul line. The fielder is on the fair side. No runners can go full out. No fewer collisions. I think that improves safety without taking anything away from the game itself.
And what's interesting about that change is that, they took away like catcher collisions before they did that. And to me, like, to me, catcher collisions were a much more almost integral part of the game. for the first base thing, that's just common sense in my opinion. Just don't let people run into each other at first base. That's why I can't play baseball anymore. Basically, I destroyed my knee running into first base once. I jumped on the bag as a guy tagged me and I twisted and fell over and just ripped my knee apart. So yeah, I don't know why they don't do that. That's not changing anything. That's just a purely safety related thing that just makes the game better in every way, in my opinion.
So, and in regards to the pitch clock, I think there's a case to be made for the fan experience being different in MLB and in NPB that changes one's perspective and the value of the pitch clock. In MLB, the time between pitches is dead. It's just dead air. You're waiting for something to happen. In NPB, in KBO, in CPBL, there's the cheer section.
That's true.
Do you really want to shorten the amount of time you hear the songs and the drums and the trumpets? No, that's why you're at the ballpark.
Yeah, that's actually a super valid point. And I also think in just a more just objective kind of way, like we were saying before, we don't have a pitch clock now and there's no problem. There's no pitchers and batters that are taking minutes at a time. People are pretty expeditious about the way they use their time. So I just don't really see it as being really a necessary issue to solve. And the Ghost
It's
Runner
a solution in search of a problem when it comes to the East Asian leagues. I hope that NPB does not bring a pitch clock in, because that means less cheering. And cheering is one of the selling points of the game to an American audience.
Absolutely. Now that I agree with that. It's part of what got me into it, was that I watched, I heard the cheers and everything. I was like, wow, this is awesome. This is so much cooler than the American league. And so I believe that brings us to the end of this week's show. I'd like to thank my two lovely guest hosts, Mr. Gabe Lerman and Michael Bealey. I've been your host, Jimbo Bernicki, and as usual, you can check out all of our games and highlights here on Pacific League TV, and tune in next week for the next podcast where we'll bring you even more news from the Pacific League. Take care.